All right, we're Kuf Amud Beis 100b, having raised the issue of the Gemara is going on goes on detours. The Gemara began with discussing inappropriate reading, and along with that, we discussed the book that was banned, the book of Ben Sira, which, as we discussed, was a book of ancient wisdom that didn't make the final cut or was never part of scripture. And because of silliness written in there, and to keep people from thinking that it had any value, the sages essentially banned the book. And the Gemara went through different things that might be able to be learned from that book. So, having talked about that, the Gemara now discusses verses in scripture that have teaching beyond their literal meaning, in terms of teaching us how to live our lives and kind of life lessons, life messages. So that's where we are right now. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom of the page, and there's there's a big square brackets, which is called a mnemonic. Did I get the right word?
Mnemonic, yeah.
Mnemonic.
You don't pronounce the M. I don't know why it's spelled that way, but you don't pronounce the M. And it's a mnemonic.
Yeah. Anyway, you're supposed to memorize that line. That's supposed to help you memorize the next part of the Gemara. So, go ahead. Yeah, Simen Zeder Rava Mesharsha Chananya Tuvya Yana Yafa Yechanan Merachem Yeshu Mekatzer. That's the mnemonic. Remember those words in your mind, and it's like an abbreviation to help you remember the next teachings. All right, this is something the Gemara does every now and again, and this is in the context of, we've talked about this a few times, that before the printing press, and then if you go even farther back, most students, that's what they did. They had to commit their Torah to memory, which is why oftentimes statements, like original statements of the Gemara, are written in very abbreviated fashion, and the Gemara has to analyze what the person meant. And the reason why it's like that is because the person speaking, let's say, gave an hour and a half lecture, and then concluded with a brief line, and said, memorize this line, this will help you remember the rest of the class. All we have 50, 60 years, 100 years later is that brief line. Now we have to deconstruct the whole hour and a half class from that one line, right? But that's what people did. They memorized these little lines, and that helped them remember the rest of the teaching. So the same thing would have been with something like this. Okay. So it says the Gemara, we have a printing press and we can look it up without this. Just on the side, since I'm mentioning this, but one of the there's a plus side in that we don't have to memorize the things, because our minds are free to read more and look at more, and we don't have to spend hours trying to memorize something. There's many downsides to not having things in memory, but one of them is that when a Jew has Torah and is committed to memory, then when he's walking somewhere, he's going somewhere, his mind doesn't have to be full with silliness. He has Torah in his mind to think and remember. And this is something that's a recurring thing in the Hayom Yoms, that having Torah in one's mind, and where one goes, one says the words, not just for themselves to keep their mind occupied, but also for the location they're in. By saying words of Torah in that location, they bring purpose and elevate that location. So, notwithstanding the fact that we don't need the memory because we have the books and we have Google that can always find the books for us very quickly, but nonetheless, it's important that a Jew have Torah committed to memory. As a kid, that was we had all kinds of competitive and prizes in school for memorizing lines of Mishlay or lines of Tanya and things like that. Okay. So Amar Rabbi Zera says, Amar Rav, the name of Rav. What's the meaning of the verse? This is a verse that was mentioned before. The verse is in Mishlay. It's a lot of Mishlay is written like this, juxtaposition. I think it's the right way of saying it. Where the first half of the verse is like a statement in description of one way, and the second half of the verse is the opposite end of that same spectrum. So a lot of Mishlay is written like that. It's a certain form of poetry where you have statements that mirror each other on their, the opposite ends. So that's the verses like this. The verse was mentioned before in Ben Sira, right? We quoted the verse in Mishlay which said that the Kol Yemei Aniyim Royim, all the days of the poor are bad, they're always suffering. And the opposite of that the other half of the verse is, which is the opposite side of this spectrum, which is Tov Lev Mishta Tamid, a glad heart is continuously feasting. Actually, this line is the end of Orach Chaim. Orach Chaim is section 1 of the Shulchan Aruch. The Code of Jewish Law is divided into 4 sections. The first section being Orach Chaim, which literally means the way of life. So it goes through a Jew's daily schedule, and it goes through a Jew's yearly schedule. So all the laws of daily prayer, tefillah, tzitzis, things that you do every day, and then the laws of holidays, beginning with Shabbos, and then starts with Pesach, and then it goes around the whole year to the end, which would mean the last set of halachas is Purim. It's the last holiday before Pesach. The last of that would be Purim Katan, the minor Purim, which only happens once every 3 times out of every 7 years, or 4 times out of 7 years. Right? 4 times out of 7 years?
It's really 7 out of 19 is a cycle.
7 out of 19 is official cycle.
It's almost 1 to 3 years.
Yeah.
We don't have Purim Katan every year?
Purim Katan is only when you have 2 others.
Oh, yeah, okay. So
Right.
leap year.
That's right. It's because it's less often. That's the last set of halachas. And there he concludes, discusses whether or not you are required to have a meal on Purim Katan. And then he concludes by saying, well, either way, and concludes with this verse, Toiv Lev Mishta Tamid, a gladdened heart is always feasting. In other words, it's always good to be in a good place and feasting. So if you have to eat on Purim Katan, you don't have to eat on Purim Katan, it's always good to eat and enjoy. Something we talked about when Purim Katan was this year. We talked about this verse. But that's the end of this verse here. Kol Yemei Aniyim Ani Royim. All the days of the poor are bad. But Toiv Lev Mishta Tamid, and a good heart or a glad heart is feasting continuously. So now the Gemara is going to describe what's the 2 people here. Who are these 2 people on the 2 ends of the spectrum? The one who's got a bad life all the time, and the one who's got a good life all the time, is always feasting, always having a good time. Who are these 2 people? So here's the Gemara. Call you Me'aniyim Rayim. All the days of the poor are bad. Elu Ba'al Talmud. These are those who study Talmud. I'm translating literally. I'll explain what it means in a moment. The Toiv Lev Mishnah Talmud, and the gladdened heart is feasting continuously. Elu Ba'al Mishnah. These are people who study the Mishnah. So those who study the Gemara, the Talmud, have a bad life always, and those who study the Mishnah have a good life always. What does that mean? So what it means is, as Rashi explains for us, Talmud, right? Talmud, as we're learning it, as we know it, spends a lot of time going back and forth trying to understand the underpinnings of law. Right? You're constantly going back and forth and asking questions and raising contradictions and raising questions and back and forth and a theory and a counter theory, as we've done here a number of times at the table. That's Talmud. Mishnah, on the other hand, is conclusive. Statement, 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 statement.
That's right.
So, one who is in the Talmud sphere, which means, doesn't necessarily mean learning Talmud specifically. It means someone whose job it is, or spends his life investigating the underpinnings of Jewish law, raising contradiction and counter-contradictions. His life is poor, and his life is difficult, not because he's poor, lacking funds, but because he's always running into questions and problems. So he's poor in knowledge. He's constantly, every time he has a theory, there's a counter theory. Every time he has a statement, he has a counter statement. So it's his Torah study is of a difficult nature. Not bad in the sense of it's evil, God forbid, but bad in the sense that it isn't pleasant. You have to really break your head to go through Talmud. But those who are in the Mishnah sphere, meaning their mode of learning is reading and covering halachic conclusions, so it's always glad because they just always come to a conclusion. Even if they're not reading the Mishnah, if they're reading just the Jewish laws, or they're reading some modern version of a collection of law, then just reading conclusion, like we do after davening here. No back and forth, just conclusion, law. That's it. It's a much more pleasant learning, and that's what the Gemara says here. When it says that the poor man's life is bad, it means someone who's got to break his head to work through Talmud, the underpinnings of the Jewish law, the philosophies and the counter arguments. He's constantly running into intellectual conundrums, versus the guy who's doing Mishnah, the person's doing halacha conclusions. His life is pleasant because he always has the conclusion directly in front of him. Rava says, Ipcha, the exact opposite. The guy who's doing Mishnah, just straight halacha conclusions, he's got a difficult life. The guy who's doing the Talmud, he has a good life. Why? The one who's doing Talmud is constantly running into questions. So, this is the meaning of what Rav Misharsha says. Mishmei de Rav, the name of Rava. My diksiv, what's the meaning of the verse? The verse reads in Koheles. The one who carries stones gets weighed down by them. Elu Bale Mishnah, these are the ones in the Mishnah. In other words, because he has a bunch of halacha conclusions, he cannot apply them outside of the direct law that he was given, unless he's weighed down by the information he has, because he can't take it anywhere. He can't take it beyond what he's been taught, or what it says. But the one who cuts wood, is warmed up by that wood. In other words, by working with it, not just carrying it, you end up getting more use out of it. So Elu Bali Talmud, these are the ones who study Talmud. So we have two different ways of understanding this. The one who's, on one hand, the first statement is the one who's looking at the underpinnings of Jewish law. He's constantly running into questions, so the study of Torah is difficult. The one who has the Mishnah, the one who just learns the halacha conclusions, very pleasant learning. Conclusion, 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 conclusion. Counter argument to that, the other way of looking at it is, the one who has just halacha conclusions is like carrying a weight because he can't apply it beyond the direct law that's been given to him. Whereas the one who is studying the underpinnings of Jewish law, he has the capacity to then take the reasoning of one law and apply it to a new law. And thus, his life is more pleasant precisely because of his questions. You see the two different versions of understanding it? You can actually see this till today. I'm not... I'm going to share this with you just because it's my experience, but I'm not like I'm not in the level of either of the two people I'm about to talk about. So both of them can swipe the floor with me on any realm of Torah at any day, at any hour. But I'm just going to, from my reading, a little reading experience, I can give you two examples of modern day examples of people like this. Two massive leading Jewish figures. You have the Moshe Feinstein on the one hand, and you have Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. I don't know that they've communicated, or if they have, they haven't, but they lived, their lives, they lived at the same time, even though Rabbi Yosef passed away much later, but they lived certainly at the same time. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was a little bit earlier, but nonetheless, if you read their writings, their tshuvas, their responsa, you can see these two things quite clearly. When you look at the tshuva from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, you have 2, 3, 4, 5 sources, but most of his responsa is going back and forth, taking apart each one of the sources and trying to apply those sources to the new scenario that's being presented to him in his question. Right? The halachic response, someone presents a question and he gives a response. His response is very much in the Talmud mode, where he'll go back and forth and breaking down a text and really with a very sharp analysis of the text and to apply it to new scenarios. Whereas if you read a response from Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, it's almost the exact opposite. In 2 pages, he'll quote 30, 40, 54 sources before computer days. Up here, he had it all. Today, someone did that as something else. He could spend a few hours on a digital hard drive like I have in my office with thousands of books.
Between two, they're opposite?
Very different, yeah. As I said, I began by saying both these people are way beyond me, and both of them can swipe the floor in any realm of Torah and any type of learning against me any day of the week. But I'm just saying, from my reading, you can see this.
Different.
You can see this very different thing. And you see right here, this Gemara is talking about Talmud versus Mishnah. The Gemara gives two versions: the Talmud, the difficult one, and Mishnah, the easy one, or is Mishnah the hard one and Talmud the hard one? So the Gemara gives both versions here, right? And you can see this till today. Someone like Moshe Feinstein, who has a sharp analysis, versus Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who has immense amounts of information and will quote literally in one response, I will quote 30, 40, 50 sources and tell you 25 go this way, 20 go that way, the halacha is like that way because it's 25. I mean, like, if someone who wants to do research on a topic, your best place to go is Rabbi Ovadia Yosef's responsa, and it gives you all the list of all the sources and you can look them up yourself. But literally list, just list of sources, including Rabbi Moshe. He'll include Rabbi Moshe into his list. So you can see it till today, these two versions. Sorry?
Set it together. And to bring it.
As I said, I don't know if they had. I don't know what their.
Way, no?
I don't know. I don't know if there was or what the communication was. Moshe was a little bit earlier. Moshe passed away in the 80s, right? And that's when Ovadia Yosef was only begin. It was at the beginning of his career, if you will, when Moshe passed away. So I don't know what their communication was. If there was, I imagine there was. Maybe I have no idea. But I'm just saying, just from the reading, they're both relatively contemporary, and you can see the difference in this style. And I'm sure there are more. Sorry.
There's nuances because Rav Moshe and later tshuvas became more Americanized. You see later tshuvas like the Chelek, Vav, and Zion, and so on. Just usually question and answer. Changes style.
I don't know that he. I don't know
the printing and maybe and also would not.
I think it's more that he, being more pressed for time, he already spent the last 30 years explaining himself. A lot of times, actually, he'll say, "Look at a tshuva I wrote earlier, and this is my conclusion. Go look over there, and you'll see the analysis."
Somebody just ask a question, give a straight answer with her.
There's also
There's also Yechavadas. and there's Yabi Omer.
Which are different, yeah.
Yabi Omer, he gets more, I wouldn't say populistic, but he goes through the different sources and argues back and forth. So he has
but it's there even so, he's not like even so, Rabbi Yosef is much more source ridden than analysis ridden. Even in Rabbi Vadia's analysis is much more source ridden.
Yeah, it's source ridden, but he has analysis though.
For sure.
Sometimes
of course.
Just floods the tshuva with.
They both have both. Clearly, they both have both. But you can see in their dominance.
They're different.
I should make that caveat. They both had all the sources, and they both had the analysis. The question is just in their stylistic of writing, and what was more dominant. What was their more dominant strength?
But earlier Jews are definitely populistic. The later ones they're shorter. Usually.
In other terms of the Gemara, it's Sinai versus Iker Harim. Right, the one who has the capacity to delve deeply into the sources versus the one who has all the information.
But even Rashi points, even one who knows Mishnah is still not in a good situation because the Mishnah is very short. You don't know the case. Mishnah, this is the last.
That's what I'm saying. He just has the conclusion without knowing.
No, but even the conclusion, not really the conclusion, they don't know which case they're referring to. So something may know this is halacha in a case, but you don't know what the case that's.
That's specifically this Mishnah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a problem because Mishnah in general. It says, more also when the case talks about. So Mishnah has a certain rule. It's true, but what case would apply? You don't know from the Mishnah.
Yeah.
So if you learn the Mishnah, you can be.
It's a similar thing to what we're saying.
Yeah. So,
okay.
So even have the conclusion, even the conclusion is not conclusive because it doesn't say what the case is.
Anyway, it's just an interesting thing. This dichotomy of two different modes of learning is all over the Gemara. You can see the discussion between the two, the value of each side of learning, and it's something that still pervades till today, as I demonstrated.
This idea of Bekias versus Iyad, and also to learn Gemara and learn Halacha to bind them.
Yeah,
that's more the Sephardic way.
I'll live with the Hilchasa, yeah.
Yeah, while the Ashkenazis were just a pilpul, but the Lechas, look it up.
What's going on today is a little different. That things are changing. It's unfortunate, but which is a little bit unfortunate if you ask me. But
everybody has an opinion.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting culturally because the cultures are now clashing for the first time in centuries.
That's true.
In Eretz Yisrael, so people are adopting different modes of learning that are different from their
but we have it in
ancestral
all aspects of life.
Sorry?
We have it in all aspects of life.
Yeah, sure.
You know, when I was president of the Vicomte, we painted a wall white. Oh, it should be gray. This one comes, it should be blue.
Baruch Hashem, because we're all Jewish.
Purple.
Okay.
Well, the difference is they're arguing just on personal feeling. Here we're actually arguing the Torah. That's a big difference.
All right. So now the Gemara is going to give
a distinction between opinions.
With 3 lines from the bottom of the page, middle of the word, middle of the line, Rabbi Chanina Omer. Another reading of the same verse. This verse again, which has juxtaposed 2 ends of the spectrum. The days of the poor are bad, and the gladdened of heart is always feasting. Right, the 2 different ends of the spectrum. So we explained it in terms of Torah reading. Now the Gemara gives a different reading. Rabbi Chanina Omer, and this is something that requires no explanation. I'll just translate it and you'll get it. Rabbi Chanina says, I'm already smiling. Kol Yimei Ani.
This unfortunately is the grist for the mill for.
Let's read it 1 second.
Missing the Torah point of view.
Let's read it. Rabbi Chanina says, Kol Yimei Ani Rayim. The first half of the verse, which says that the days of the poor are always bad. Zeh mi sheyesh la ishara. This is someone who has a bad woman, bad wife. And the good heart is feasting always. The second half of the verse, this is someone who has a good wife. No explanation required. But now the Gemara tells you, don't think it's blaming everybody else. Look at yourself too. And that's the next explanation. First the Gemara gave a Torah explanation, then the Gemara gave circumstantial. Are you married to a good woman or not a good woman? And now the Gemara is going to tell you, don't blame your wife the whole time. It's also you're also at fault here, as the Gemara is about to say. Rabbi Yanai says, Kol Yemei Ani Rayim, the first half of the verse, which says that all the days of the poor are bad, Zeh istanis. This is someone who's extremely particular. If you're particular about everything, then you're always going to be annoyed.
That's
true. But the one who's gladdened of heart is always feasting. Zeh Shadaita Yafa. This is someone who has literally means a nice mind. It means to say he's not so particular. Whatever he has, he's happy with. So the Gemara flips it around. It's true, circumstances are sometimes circumstance is the reason for either being the poor man who's always in a bad situation because of his circumstances, wife or whatever it is. But you got to look in the mirror as well. Someone who's constantly particular, then they're always going to be bad because it's never perfect. And someone who's daita yafa, someone who's a vatran, you say, it's someone who is forgiving. He's forgiving. He's like, he's okay. It's not sorry. It's not perfect. And he's also always going to be happy. Overlooking, yeah. He's always. And we all know people like both of these ways. We know people like in both of these extremes. But then the Gemara says, but be careful how far you take this. Rabbi Yochanan says, Kol Yemei Ani Rayim, the first half of the verse which says all the days of the poor are always bad, Zerach money. This is someone who is, literally means overly merciful. Meaning to say, he's so empathetic that he's paralyzed by everybody else's problems because he's so anxious by listening to everybody else. So it's you're being a vatran, you're letting everything slide, and you're care about everybody else in the world, and it can cripple you. So you have to have a line. In other words,
How is that?
there are people I know who are anxious. They have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning because it's not a joke. It's a serious thing.
Because I'm thinking about myself. That's what I'm laughing.
And why do they have a hard time? Because they read on the news the night before that somewhere in who knows where someone got hurt, or they watched a video of somebody who got hurt in somewhere across the globe. Someone they never met, someone they never will meet, and the video is probably 10 years old. But they're still.
Or even Bisman is that with Jewish sufferer. That's always
Yeah.
a problem with the whole.
No, I'm saying, but you take it. There has to be a person has to have empathy. A person has to have empathy, but a person who's crippled by it to the point that they can't function because they're constantly being bogged down by things that are way out of their control. Calling me under the person's going to be living his whole life in anxiety, constantly worried. And therefore, Toved Mishta Talmud, and the one who is constantly feasting, that's also not a good thing. You never care about anybody. So Zari, this is someone who is Azari literally means he's mean, he's cruel, like a sociopath. Doesn't feel for anybody. So he's always happy because doesn't care anybody. So the Gemara is saying both. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan is reading that both sides of this verse are actually both no good. Overly compassionate to the point that you never met somebody and you're crippled, you can't go on with your day because you heard about somebody who's hurting somewhere. And in the other extreme, his next door neighbor is hurting and he's going on with his life happy and dandy. Both of these things are no good, says Rabbi Yochanan. So both the guy the poor man is always crippled, overly empathetic, and the guy who's constantly feasting because he doesn't care for anybody, both of those, says Rabbi Yochanan, are no good. It's got to be balanced in the middle. Okay, we'll do one more statement like this. Two more statements to finish up this reading of the verse. Omer Rabbi Levi says, last line of Kuf from the base. Call you me anirayim. The first half of the verse, we're still reading the same verse. First half of the verse, which says, all the days of the poor are bad. Ze shadaitei tzara. This is someone who is narrow-minded. So there are different ways of understanding this. One is, like Rashi says, which is that someone who's constantly worried about what his friends are doing. And he's constantly worried about what's going to happen to him. So he's constantly worried, which is very similar to the thing before. That's one way of reading it. And the one who's the Torah Mishlay Talmud, the verse which says, the second half of the verse which says that the gladdened of heart is always happy, is that one who has a broad mind and it's not always worried. Okay, that's one way of understanding it. Another way of understanding it is, and this Rashi alludes to it in one word, is, and this I think is a way of making this different than the previous statement. The previous statement was one who's overly compassionate is crippled with anxiety, and one who's on the other extreme, cruel, doesn't care for anybody, is always jolly. Neither of those are good. Here the Gemara says like this, and this is the second version of Rashi, so it seems at least, that the one who's narrow-minded is the one who he can't what's the word? In Yiddish they halten. He can't hold. It's not really how you say it in English, but he can't see somebody else's perspective. He's stuck. He's myopic. He came to a conclusion, and it has to be this way. Nobody else can get that opinion. So he's always going to be nervous because he's never going to have. You're never going to have 100% of the people 100% agreeing with 100% of what you think. So if a person feels like, hey, this is the only way, is a narrow mind. This is the conclusion. This is the way it has to be. It can't be any other way. Then of course you're always going to be a poor man who always is bad.
Also gets angry.
And therefore gets angry all the time. He's constantly angry because this person didn't agree with him. This person did it differently, and it wasn't exactly the way I thought it was supposed to be. You can't live that way. But someone who has a broad mind, so I have my opinion. It's very nice, but this person has his opinion. Okay. So he'll find some middle ground, or even, sometimes it's not even about middle ground, because sometimes when it's a conflict of interest, okay, you have to make a middle ground. But then there is even something not related to you. But because that person is doing it in a different way than I do it, even though I do it in my life, certain people, they can't handle it. Why is he doing it that way? He's supposed to be doing it the way I do it. What does it bother you how he's doing it? Leave him alone. Let him do it. little bit of broader mind. So this is the way you like to do it. Fine, you do it your way. This person likes to do it that way. Let him do it that way. It's okay. You're going to be fine. Right? So never mind when it comes to, two people trying to come to conclusion how they should do a shared enterprise, but even just doing like parallel lives. There are people who are daitek tzara, they have a narrow mind and they can't see anybody else's perspective, and because the person's not doing it the way they're doing it, even though they do it with them, they can't. They're getting angry, they're getting upset, and this is the first. They can't function. And this is the first half of the verse, that the poor man's life is always bad. Poor man, poor in his mind. He can't see beyond his little myopic way of thinking. And then the other half of the verse says, the gladdened heart is always feasting. He's happy. He's happy for him to do it his way, and I'm happy for to do it my way. And everybody's happy, everybody's fine. Final comment on this verse, which is like this. Rabbi Levi further says, the verse says that all the days of the wicked, all the days of the poor are bad. What do you mean all the days are bad? There's Shabbos and Yom Tif. And Shabbos and Yom Tif, even the poorest amongst the Jewish people, sit, rest, don't think about their week. So what does it mean the poor man's life is always bad? Shabbos and Yom Tif has got to be good. So why is it bad? How is it every day? It should say only 6 days of the week are bad. Shabbos is good. So it says the Gemara like this, and this is it's an interesting line, and the Rambam talks about this in his laws of how to live a proper and healthy life. Rambam has like a part of Jewish law is a person supposed to live healthy, and the Rambam writes this law, and I'll tell you in a minute the context in which the Rambam says that. So it says the Gemara like this: yes, even the day of Shabbos is unpleasant for the poor person, even though he's feasting. Why? Because the Shmuel, like the statement that Shmuel said, the Amar Shmuel for Shmuel said, Shinoi Veses, change in routine, Tchilas Chayle Mayayim is the beginning of a stomach problem. That's the statement. The beginning of unhealthy is changing routines. The poor man, who is used to eating bread and salt all week long, comes Shabbos and he's feasting, but even that's no good because his body can't handle it. The extreme of eating bread and salt and all of a sudden eating all delicacies and then back to eating bread and salt and going back and forth, it's not healthy. So the context in which the Rambam writes this is, there's a law called the Hilchos Deos, which is, the Rambam describes a person's proper living, right? The Pasuk says we're supposed to take care of our health. So the Rambam writes how to live a healthy life. It's what today you'd call holistic medicine. It's interesting that he wrote about it, 800 years ago, and you can market it. If you looked at his diet, market it as Maimonides' diet, and you make a lot of money.
It's actually what they call now the Mediterranean diet.
The what?
Mediterranean diet.
It follows this,
Yeah.
how when you shower, how you shower, what you eat, when you eat, what hour you eat, when you sleep, when you wake up. He has a whole protocol of how you live your life, how often you walk, how often you rest, how often you this, how long before you sleep you eat, and when you eat, drink your water. God's a whole diet, and he says, I guarantee that if you follow my diet, this diet, you will not die of any sickness. You'll die a healthy man because you follow the diet. But he says, caveat: if you started one way and you switch to my way, I can't guarantee you're going to be okay. Why? Because changing routine is the beginning of his sickness. This is when he quotes this Gemara.
As early as possible, but you have to allow
So
the
it's possible.
adjustment period.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
If you follow his diet properly, he's talking about medicines. I don't know if the human constitution was different than it is now, and whether the foods he offers have the same nutritional value that it has now, given that basically everything we eat is GMOs. So I don't know if it exactly matches up today, but that's what he says. He says if you follow this diet, you'll die a healthy man. But if you radically change your diet, it's not going to be good, because shinoi veses, changing in routine, is tchilas chayle, is the beginning of sickness, quoting this Gemara. And in this context over here, the Gemara is saying that even though this poor man enjoys his Shabbos, even that is a trouble to him because of the extreme change he's going from his week, where he doesn't eat anything, and then on Shabbos all of a sudden he's overeating.
That's both the quantity and quality of food, because usually poor man eats very simple food, very light. Shabbos you have heavier food, so it's more digestible. Also quality of food, the quantity of food.
Yeah.
With both of them.
And this concludes the Gemara's analysis of that verse, which reads, the beginning, the poor man, his life is always bad, and the gladness of heart is always feasting. Very interesting, different interpretations. And tomorrow, God willing, we get to a little discussion on the appropriate use of Torah. And then we get back to other kind of heresy. All
What I
right.
used to do, or I would do it again in the future, when I'm training for an Ironman, the 3 weeks leading up to the race, I will eat the same thing for breakfast every single day, the same thing for lunch every single day, and the same thing for supper every single day.
Get your body into a routine.
For 3 weeks until that race day. Because if I know I'm feeling okay today, that means I know I'm going to feel okay tomorrow, and I know I'm going to feel okay on race day.
Right, you have the
But
same routine.
A lot of people, they start panicking a few days before the race, and they start changing their diet. And come race day, they all have like upset stomachs.
It's funny, Rambam writes about sleeping the right time, and it's funny, today we understand that your body adjusts REM cycle to when you go to sleep and when you wake up. Right? Consistently in what time you go to sleep and what time you wake up is the key to feeling rejuvenated after sleep. It's not how long you sleep. It's when you sleep and when you get up, and making sure it's consistent. And Rambam writes about that. It's interesting. I mean, I don't think he described REM cycle, but it predates it by I don't know how many centuries. It's pretty interesting.
He also mentions the hours. It's typical, it should be 8 hours.
He mentions 8 hours, but primarily you're right. It's when you go to sleep and when you get up.
The quantity and the quality.
Yeah.
The fixed times.
Yeah. That's when I'm starting to have trouble.
You're switching.
Switching over all the time.
I mean, we can't
Right, a wonderful day,
It never
buddy.
used to bother me.